Welcome back everyone to another ASMR video. And today we are continuing on with the God of War 20th Anniversary Retrospective. And here we have part 2, then handheld titles, God of War Betrayal, June 20th, 2007. So this is the first of the handheld titles that they're going to showcase here in this chapter. Now, I never played this. This was a mobile game because back then I did not have a powerful enough phone to play it. But I did watch the gameplay on YouTube a million years ago, and this is the only game to this day of God of War that I've yet to play. Beaten and played every other one. So, a mobile deity. Hard to remember those prehistoric times when phones were just phones, right? By the mid-2000s, however, cell phone technology had taken big steps toward producing the pocket computers of today. As a result, the market for mobile entertainment took off like a Titan rocket. Handheld video games had been around since the 1990s for portable devices like the Game Boy, but by 2005, the proliferation of mobile phones compelled video game companies to explore the addictive fun of gaming on the go. For this reason, Sony Online Entertainment began to develop a series of mobile games based on successful Sony licenses. One of those licenses, naturally, was God of War. An internal group at Sony, led by Phil Cohen, a former quality control lead analyst turned designer/producer, developed a proposal for a Java-based God of War phone spin-off that would be entitled Betrayal. Once it was approved by Santa Monica Studio, the Sony Group contracted with JavaGround, a successful mobile game developer based in Irvine, California, to provide the engineering expertise. We developed the concept and did a lot of the level design in the engine that JavaGround provided, says Cohen. They were strong engineers with really good tech, and it was a joint effort. The God of War Betrayal concept was lean, just 10 levels, with maybe 3 to 4 hours of gameplay. But the Sony team was wholly impressed with how JavaGround's mobile toolset brought surprising depth to a handset platform. Some people in the studio were skeptical about God of War as a 2D side-scroller on a phone screen, admits Cohen. Could we really squeeze a AAA license into a device with only a few hundred kilobytes? Then they saw the early demos. I think everyone was almost shocked by the quality of the experience. Shows you some in-game graphics. Building a story bridge. Full development started in August of 2006, and Sony officially announced God of War Betrayal in May of 2007. Once given the green light for production, Cohen was determined to develop what he called a true God of War adventure. One that was not only fun to play, but also rich in narrative, deepening the ongoing Kratos saga, and adding new canon to the universe. To that end, the Sony design team began working with Marian Krawczyk, a lead writer on both God of War and God of War 2. Krawczyk saw Betrayal as a perfect opportunity to bridge some of the story gap between the two PS2 games. She constructed a narrative around the central motif of betrayal and vengeance, the dark force that powers Kratos and fuels his burning rage. Phil and I decided to explore more of Kratos' backstory, how he came into such sharp conflict with the Olympian gods after ascending to the throne, says Krawczyk. Part of our plan was to lay the groundwork for his ultimate confrontation with Zeus. In Betrayal, the newly defied Kratos leads his Spartan army on a rampage across Greece, much to the displeasure of Zeus and his fellow gods of Olympus. The new God of War ends up facing a pair of powerful antagonists, Argos, the monstrous, many-eyed pet of Hera, queen of the gods, and Syrinx, son of Hermes, and like his father, a messenger of the gods. God of War Betrayal is here. Inside look, lessons learned. My Sony team was determined to honor the God of War aesthetic and universe. All of us were massive fans, so that certainly helped. Playing it obsessively, Even today, if you dissect that first God of War, you'll find great lessons for any game designer. We felt like our eyes were opened, applying those lessons to our micro format. One example from a pacing standpoint, like in great action movies, the God of War formula starts with a bang, throwing you right into a large boss fight. You get glimpses of everything you'll see in the game, big action and crazy swarms of enemies. At that point, you don't know what you're doing, you're just button mashing. Like, oh my god, people are dying left and right. And then a Hydra comes at you, and you're thinking, holy crap, that was just the first level. But then they take it all away, and slowly build back up to that crazy intensity again. Here's something tangential I'll never forget. Working on Betrayal, I met David Jaffe briefly, 2, maybe 3 times in group meetings. Just quick check-ins on whether our game was upholding God of War standards. 15 years later, I'm at PAX East promoting a new VR game. David walks past and he's like, Phil, hey, what's up? Don't know how he even recognized me. We talked for quite a while, catching up. He remembered everything about Betrayal and our work. And that was from Phil Cohen, producer and designer of God of War Betrayal. Here it shows, the battle has angered the gods. They have sent Hera's giant Argos to slay us. Honing the Arc. Working with Marianne was fun. I spent a few months coming up with some very ambitious story arc concepts. Like, enough for 10 mobile games, right? I'd send them to her and she'd say, this is good, this is not good, let's change this. Have you thought about this? Then she'd rewrite everything, send it back to me, and I'd be like, oh my god, yeah, this is so much better, thank you. Eventually we locked down a manageable story that fit into their God of War timeline. Again, Phil Cohen, producer and designer of God of War Betrayal. Little Box, Big Game. The Betrayal design crew also sought fidelity to the God of War gameplay experience. We wanted a totally legit event, built from the ground up, says Cohen, not just watered down generic features pasted over some typical mobile platformer. Intensive study of the 2 God of War console games helped his team internalize the unique pacing of the series. Cohen also consulted extensively with David Jaffe, Corey Barlog, Eric Williams, and other console team leads to ensure that the look, feel, and tempo of the gameplay met franchise standards. Their input was generous and absolutely invaluable, says Cohen. But again, the challenge was to meet those standards using just a fraction of a console's allotted memory. According to Cohen, one trick was to merge a single tile set with a palette swapping scheme, able to render a surprising variety of environments. He credits Betrayal's art director Nathan Leland with outstanding work on that scheme. The design also replicated the console game's functionality using only the phone's D-pad and soft keys. With such extreme hardware limitations, says Cohen, we had to strike a fine balance between character art, frames of animation, environment, interactive objects, and the cost of the game code for each. Ultimately, the magic came from JavaGround's engine. It was way ahead of everybody else's, with a super advanced compression technique for the sprites. It was truly some technical wizardry. Lots of cool little tricks that let us cram so much into a tiny space. In the end, the Sony design team and the JavaGround engineers, aided by character art and animation specialists at the developer Way Forward, did a remarkable job of recreating the fluid, badass brutality expected in God of War combat. The team managed to script more than 100 separate animations for Kratos, a remarkable achievement in such limited space. We were determined to get him twirling those chain blades just right, says Leland. A wireless winner. Critics anointed God of War Betrayal as one of the finest mobile games of its generation. Players applauded the spectacle of Kratos wreaking havoc on handset displays and deemed it a surprisingly worthy extension of the God of War universe. As one reviewer put it, Betrayal will not let down franchise fans that love Kratos' graceful, deadly blood ballets. Industry observers also acknowledged that God of War Betrayal played a significant role in establishing the mobile phone as a valid gaming platform, even for serious gamers. Hera's beast will not keep us from triumph. We have God of War Chains of Olympus, March 4th, 2008. Kratos enters the PSP pantheon. Like the rest of the gaming world, the team at PlayStation Portable developer Ready at Dawn, RAD, was instantly enamored of the first God of War when it launched in March of 2005. The studio was already deep into development of Daxter, a PSP spin-off title based on another Sony-owned property, the Jak and Daxter series. But God of War's big splash inspired the RAD crew to envision Kratos slicing his way across PSP screens too. Before long, the studio, based in Irvine, California, had sent a contingent up the coast to Santa Monica with a proposal for a portable God of War game, a pitch so persuasive it was soon greenlighted at Sony. Foster Cities, Sony's corporate headquarters, still wanted us to do a Daxter sequel, says Ready at Dawn co-founder Ru Weerasuriya. But we came into that pitch meeting proclaiming how much we loved God of War and how we thought it could shine on PSP. After Daxter's release in 2006, a resounding success, Ready at Dawn turned its full attention to its new God of War project, Chains of Olympus, with Weerasuriya sitting in the director's chair. His team knew the bar was set high. Inevitably, their work would be compared to its PlayStation 2 predecessors. The challenge, they decided, was to aim even higher. Inside look, God of PSP. We at Ready at Dawn were showing our game in progress, Daxter, for PSP at E3 2005, and it turned out that show was a revelation. God of War was a big smash hit. It had just released. I was stunned. I'd never seen anything quite like it. It had this beautiful mix of elements that worked so perfectly front to end. Later, as we were finishing Daxter, released in March 2006, there was this general assumption at Sony that we'd work on a sequel next, Daxter 2. But internally at the studio, all we could talk about was doing a PSP God of War title. We were smitten with that game. A connection to Santa Monica Studio was made through Alan Becker. When we pitched our idea, some there suggested a 2D Kratos side-scroller, and I get it. A lot of fun PSP games were side-scrollers. I loved them. But the PSP was also the first handheld that could actually recreate a 3D console experience, and that's what we were determined to do. And that was Ru Weerasuriya, co-founder of Ready at Dawn and game director of God of War Chains of Olympus. The game's original design, in fact, was even more ambitious than the console games. More characters, environments, and puzzles than we could sanely manage, laughs Weerasuriya. Some trimming was required, but at the very least, Ready at Dawn wanted to push the PSP further than ever before. Overhauling a RAD engine. The bold plans for the new game would require a substantial upgrade of the proprietary engine the studio had built for Daxter. Fortunately, it featured a much-praised adaptable architecture. This helped the team develop a robust 2.0 evolution for Chains. Overseen by RAD's programming director Garrett Foster, the engine overhaul included new camera tools to switch from Daxter's free view to the standard God of War fixed view. Ready at Dawn also convinced Sony to release a firmware upgrade, giving the team access to the full 333 MHz clock speed of the PSP processor. So a number of systems were entirely rebuilt, says Foster. Getting that access helped facilitate the design of our new environments and monsters. In the end, the gameplay design included all the well-paced elements one expects from a God of War experience. Fluid and fierce combo-based combat, clever platforming, thoughtful puzzles, and RAD's reconfigured control mapping was one of the game's most acclaimed technical features. Several reviewers even preferred the PSP's control scheme to the PS2's, with IGN calling the feel absolutely perfect. Inside look, a Kratos masterclass. I was a big arcade guy growing up. I played insane amounts of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, any fighting game where I could take somebody's quarter away from them. So when I first played God of War, its core experience was right up my alley. Then I met Eric Williams, combat systems designer on the first two God of War console games, and it confirmed my suspicions about why I was so drawn to that game. We were having trouble dialing in the combat design on Chains of Olympus, so we set up this meeting down at Santa Monica, looking for the secret sauce we were missing. At one point, we were discussing how Kratos does his awesome grab move, how it works, and why it feels the way it does. And Eric goes, "Oh, you mean the Zangief bubble?" Well, my head shot up like a prairie dog. I was like, "Did you say Zangief, like from Street Fighter?" And it dawned on me that Eric and his team looked at Street Fighter as the template for how they were designing the systems and mechanics that drove their combat. Hit reactions, hit boxes, recovery, all that stuff was inspired by those Capcom games we all love so much, but more forgiving and accessible. That was from Dana Jan, lead level designer on Chains of Olympus. That first year was a huge struggle. 8 months in, we realized Kratos was just not right, and we basically had to reboot the design. But then we brought in Eric Williams as a consultant after he was finished with God of War 2. That was a big, big breakthrough. Eric gave us a masterclass in all the fundamentals of Kratos design. I mean, taking us through how Kratos moves the animations bit by bit. There's just so much brilliant nuance to all those movements that make Kratos the greatest action hero in gaming. Eric taught us all of that. From that moment on, things clicked. Working on the action scripts, we stopped trying to reinvent the wheel and tapped more of the tried and true methodologies of Santa Monica Studio. And that was from Ru Wisuria on the technical challenges of Chains of Olympus. Linking the chains. Seeking to stay true to the core story and yet expand the God of War mythology in a canonical way, the Chains of Olympus narrative team brought in Marianne Krawczyk and Cory Barlog, lead writers for the 2 console games. Barlog, of course, was also directing God of War 2 in 2006, as Ready at Dawn was gearing up their PSP project. Our first chat with Cory was amazing, says Weir Sarura. His narrative overview was like classic campfire storytelling, and then we went back and forth for an hour. It was so collaborative right from the start, and that carried over the whole project. We all wanted to see that epic, operatic God of War tone carry over to PSP, says Barlog. Ready at Dawn brought in some great fresh ideas, aspects we hadn't yet explored, to help fill in the overarching story that links the franchise. We certainly wanted it epic, adds Weir Surya, but we also wanted to give Kratos a more human side too. Story-wise, Chains of Olympus serves as a prequel to the first God of War in 2005. The tale opens during Kratos' 10-year period of pledged servitude to the gods. He still attends faithfully to their wishes, but he's grown tired of the Pantheon's self-serving requests and the unending torments of his nightmares. As Weir Surya explains, Kratos is starting to see just how deceitful and scheming all the Olympian gods can be. Nobody is trustworthy up there. Inside look, watching where to step. We worked very carefully with Santa Monica Studio to identify which Greek gods and story elements we could bring into play on Chains of Olympus. We didn't want to encroach on their narrative plans for God of War 2, nor any future installments they might want to explore. I was a huge fan of Greek mythology as a kid. It was very dear to my heart. I was fascinated with Titans and Tartarus and that whole side of the lore. So I thought, if we can't use the main gods, let's go there. But then, talking to David Jaffe, we started talking about that human side of Kratos, the story of his wife and daughter, his terrible loss and his pain. What if we focus less on Kratos the God Killer and look at the origin story of the Ghosts of Sparta, a story that better explores the roots of his rage? Getting Marianne Krawczyk on board as lead scriptwriter was not only great for continuity of theme and language and all that, but also because she really championed that notion of humanizing Kratos. And that was from Ru Wisuria on developing the Chains of Olympus plot. Accolades and awards. God of War Chains of Olympus released for PSP on March 4th, 2008, to glowing reviews and a stellar rating of 91 on the review aggregator Metacritic, still the highest rated PSP title in the site's history. One critic called it essentially a console experience on a handheld. God of War Chains of Olympus runs great. Its texture detail is phenomenal, and the art direction is on par with anything you see in the consoles. Every attack is fluid and satisfying. It's a great reason to own a PSP. That was the IGN video review. Designated as 2008's Handheld Game of the Year at both the Game Developer's Choice and the Interactive Achievement Awards, Chains of Olympus was also named the year's best PSP title by leading industry publications such as Wired, IGN, and GameSpot. Today it is widely considered one of the very best PSP games of all time. Not a bad track record. Whether on console, mobile phone, or PSP, it didn't matter. Kratos rose up and conquered the platform. The God of War franchise was becoming recognized as solid gold, one of the most respected brands in the industry. God of War Ghost of Sparta, November 2nd, 2010. PSP Redux. Ready at Dawn hit a rare trifecta with its award-winning PSP hit Chains of Olympus. The critical praise, industry honors, and commercial success were all certainly fine rewards for a job well done. But for the studio, just as gratifying was the artistic thumbs up from the God of War Sanctum in Santa Monica. That kind of unqualified success led eventually to a no-brainer decision for all involved. Let's do it again. Work on a follow-up PSP title for God of War began in 2008, with Dana Jan, lead-level designer on Chains of Olympus, taking the directorial reins from Rui Soria. Although the project's 2-year development cycle would overlap with Santa Monica's own work on God of War 3, the two studios continued their fruitful collaboration on content for Ghost. God of War release order purers may want to flay us with twirling blades for placing Ghost of Sparta here in our retrospective, seeing as the PSP title launched almost 8 months after God of War 3. But Santa Monica Studio concurs that Ghost belongs here in Part 2 with its handheld brethren, Betrayal and Chains of Olympus. Ghost of the Past. A key creative connection with Santa Monica came when Cory Barlog, game director for God of War 2, and a core contributor from the earliest days of the franchise, agreed to lead the Ghost of Sparta writing room. Barlog had also overseen Santa Monica's early development of God of War 3, but stepped down after 8 months to pursue other career goals. Inside look, from Chains to Ghost. We love God of War, but we'd started our collaboration with Santa Monica Studio as fish out of water. We had lots of cartoon-style platformer experience, but this gritty hack-and-slash epic adventure thing was new to us. And look, when Ready at Dawn does a licensed spin-off title, we're very respectful of the IP and want fidelity to the source material. Our goals were ambitious. We really wanted to make our PSP games feel and play like PlayStation 2 games. So, on Chains of Olympus, with help from SMS, we worked very hard to design layouts where our camera could behave like God of War's third-person camera, and to recreate other hallmarks, like the pathing that foreshadows where you're going, and the classic arenas for those great combat set pieces. When we got to Ghost of Sparta, we were pretty dialed in on the nuances of how God of War works, and the collaboration continued to be very active. We felt a deep sense of responsibility to the entire franchise. Everybody really cared on both ends. That was Dana Jan, game director of God of War Ghost of Sparta. I was thrilled to join the Ghost narrative team, and to be honest, I felt liberated, he says. It was the first God of War title where I had no production responsibilities other than writing. I loved it. The team decided to set their story in the gap between the events of God of War and God of War 2, exploring Kratos' early days as the Greek pantheon's newest deity. It just made good sense to fill that void, says Jan. Kratos had dispatched Ares, got a nice throne, and some crazy new armor. What happened in that interim? One goal, as in Chains of Olympus, was to further humanize Kratos by providing context and insight into his seemingly monolithic rage. Ghost of Sparta digs into the Spartans' backstory to expose familial roots and trauma. Flashbacks introduce his half-brother Deimos and their harrowing boyhood encounter with Ares. Later, he faces a monstrous incarnation of his mother, Callisto. This new backstory also reveals the dramatic origins of Kratos' tattoo and scar. We get to see more of where Kratos came from and how he started down the path to destroy our world, says Jan. In the end, the guy ends up killing almost every family member he has, including the ones he loved. It's quite a tragic, heartbreaking tale. Everything this guy touches, he seems to break. Putting on a human face. Ghost of Sparta's core gameplay elements remain much the same as those in its PSP predecessor. The designers added a few new weapons and powers, including a spear-shield combination modeled on classic Spartan combat. But to highlight the more personal aspects of Kratos, the animation team also added more detailed facial expressions to his in-game character model. We wanted our story to go bigger and more epic and over the top than Chains, says lead animator Adam Byrne. But at the same time, we wanted to enhance the more intimate, personal aspects of Kratos. We wanted his humanity reflected in his face. Here it shows Kratos and Deimos as boys, and then an encounter, Ares encounter right down here. Smarter, trickier. When you're making your first game, you're just trying to make it permanent, or perform it and get it out the door. Not a lot of time for reflection. Maybe you do some optimizations along the way, but man, you just want to get it in the box. After it's out, you can look back on your processes. So after we got Chains of Olympus shipped, we had time to review everything for Ghosts of Sparta. Our goal was to make everything grander and bigger, like epic scale, no-brainer God of War spectacle that nobody would expect to see on a handheld screen. For example, the game opens on a ship sailing on a rolling ocean. Our art director, Nathan Liff, figured out some novel tricks, like 4 joints to create a mesh to get our ocean waves undulating. It was clever and looked great. Of course, we did a lot of code optimization and AI work and other process stuff, but mainly we were just maturing as a studio, becoming smarter in how we were doing the work. And that was from Dana Jan, game director of God of War, Ghosts of Sparta. Inside look, there's one thing Kratos cannot do. Derek Mulder, Ready at Dawn's gameplay programmer for Ghosts of Sparta, reports that he worked closely with the Santa Monica studio team to craft a definitive list of 25 rules governing how Kratos can physically move in the game. My favorite, because it tells you so much about the essence of his character, is Kratos never backs up, says Mulder. The guy's always moving forward, always aggressive, always wading into the fray. Every aspect of his physicality is wired that way. As you play, I think you pick up on it subconsciously. Dana Jan notes that even after an attack move, when Kratos returned to his neutral stance, it had to be a step forward, never backward. A version of the concept showed up in the game as part of the Spartan Code, a motto that Kratos dispenses to his brother Deimos. A Spartan warrior never falls on his back. The art team sketched a new bestiary of Boreas beasts, Triton soldiers, Gyrian guardians, and assorted satyrs, harpies, hoplites, and other undead creatures. They also added fabulous boss monsters like Skyla, the Purious Lion, and the Mother Beast, manifestation of Callisto, and then introduced powerful new godly foes like Poseidon, Erinus, and Thanatos. Meanwhile, the environment team crafted spectacular new locations, such as the Domain of Death, Methana Volcano, and the fabled city of Atlantis. Santa Monica Studio always wanted to take God of War to Atlantis, but it didn't fit their early storyline, says Nathan Liff, Ready at Dawn's art director for Ghost. We looked over some of the old concept art and decided, hey, let's add this place to our game. A palm-sized epic. Like its PSP predecessor, Ghost of Sparta sold a boatload of units and reeled in an impressive haul of awards for 2010. It was named Portable Game of the Year at the annual Interactive Achievement Awards and received multiple nominations and awards in the handheld game category from industry media. Kotaku called it a palm-sized epic. And that is where we are going to leave off on this video. The next part of the God of War 20th Anniversary Retrospective will be Part 3, the PS3 titles. God of War 3, March 16th, 2010. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.